Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Dide Adewale and we explore on this channel how economics and politics interact in the international system. Here we don't simply analyze current events, we ask deeper questions like who really benefits economically, how does politics shape markets, and how does economics reshapes the international system and international relations at large. So, today I want to discuss something that billions of people love, and I want to talk about football, most especially the FIFA World Cup that everyone is enjoying at the moment. And it's because I believe the World Cup is no longer just a football tournament. I think it has become one of the most powerful economic and political events in the world. This is just my opinion. So, there's some questions I did like to share and would like your feedback on, and it will help us to interact on the channel. And things like, if FIFA were a country, where would it rank economically? I don't know if anyone has ever thought about that. Think about it. Because the World Cup attracts about 5 billion viewers worldwide, and more countries participate more than even the United Nations program. So you find global corporations, they spend billions, just to have their logos appear during 1 month of the football tournament. You have government compete for years just for the privilege of hosting it. And why? You know, just because football is no longer simply just sports. Football has become economics, it has become politics, it has become a soft power. But what really or who really makes money? So when people think about the World Cup, you think about trophies. When you and I think about the World Cup, we think about trophies. But it's different for the government. The governments, they think about investments, corporations think about profit, and FIFA thinks about the revenue. So, according to FIFA's own financial projections, the 2026 World Cup is expected to generate around 8.9 billion in revenue, and this will make it the biggest commercial tournament in football history just in 2026. So pause and think about that. So nearly $9 billion will be generated from at least one tournament, or nearly $9 billion is generated from one tournament. And that raises a question: who actually receives this money? Does it stay with the host countries? Does it stay with local businesses? Or does more of this flow through FIFA, broadcasters, sponsors, or multinational corporations? So, this is where economics becomes more interesting than football. Also, the question: why do countries fight to host the World Cup? I don't know, maybe fight is the right word, but why do countries fight to host the World Cup? You can see that most people will assume countries host the World Cup because they love football, but that's just partly true. So, countries host this football because they hope to gain from tourism, they hope to gain from foreign investments, they hope to gain from, you know, infrastructure, international recognition, political prestige. So hosting the World Cup will tell the world we are open for business, we are open for interactions, we are open for investments. And this is simply called soft power. And you see, countries will use their culture instead of military this time around to force a kind of influence or to increase influence. And this here is international relations in action. But now, who pays? Who pays? So this is where things become very controversial, or this is where things become very interesting, because while FIFA earns billions, you have host governments who spend billions because they spend billions to get new stadiums, They want to beef up their infrastructure in terms of transport, security, airports, roads, police. They want to make sure their emergency services is working and on point. And actually, many of these upgrades are paid by taxpayers' money. So you're wondering, and this is where the political question is, should public money and finance be used for these kinds of tournaments? Or should public money finance a tournament whose largest commercial benefits often flow elsewhere? Let me know what you think. So that doesn't mean hosting is bad. It doesn't mean it's something countries should start avoiding. That's not what we're trying to discuss here. But it does means the cost and benefits are actually distributed unevenly. So what's now the politics behind the tournament? Because football has always been political. So think about it. Countries wave their flags, they have national anthems where they sing, they have diplomatic meetings. You find head of states coming to watch, celebrities they come to watch. You find trade delegations, corporate sponsors, or corporate sponsorship, and you see that the World Cup becomes a stage where nations project their image or what they want you to think about them. So just during one tournament, countries can reshape global perceptions more effectively than years of diplomacy. And somehow, through this method, sports becomes a tool of foreign policy. So it would be weird if we don't talk about immigration. So immigration and the World Cup, how does this work? You see, people overlook something and you forget that the World Cup actually celebrates global unity. But can everyone actually participate really? Does everyone actually attend the World Cup equally? Is it possible to have equal participation? And you can see here, let's use Africa. Many supporters come from Africa, many come from Asia, Latin America, but still struggle with visa restrictions. And you see, the tournament will tell the world, oh, come and celebrate, it's the World Cup. But immigration sometimes relies or replies and say, no, not everyone is welcome. So that contradiction raises an important international relations questions, which is, can global sport truly be global if mobility is unequal? Let's look at the African question. It's a very difficult question, but there is an African question, which is that Africa produces some of the world's biggest football talents. We all know that. African players dominate the European football, they dominate the teams. African supporters are among the most passionate in the world as well. And you see that African television audiences are also very enormous. Yet, how much of this is economic value that belongs to Africa or stays in Africa? How much of this revenue stays in Africa or has any impact in Africa? So you see, European clubs, they receive transfer fees. European broadcasters sell television rights. European companies dominate the sponsorship. Even European leagues generate enormous commercial income. And Africa only exports the talents. And that is not only football. So this reflects that the structure of the global economy is very, very much uneven. And you see, many developing countries would export raw talent while developed economics capture the value of this raw talent. They capture the highest value. They benefit the most. So somehow here, football mirrors the international political economic structure and its dynamics. Okay, what about Nigeria? I always like to bring things down and use Nigeria as a point of example. Well, Nigeria is perhaps one of the greatest football nations which has never won the World Cup, but football represents something bigger in Nigeria. And I could only say, if you imagine, if Nigeria developed and you develop things like elite coaching education, we have things like, sports technology, broadcasting companies, we have things like football finance, sport analytics, even football tourism. Imagine we had, academies that retain great talents, that retain great values, instead of just exporting all the players all the time. Nigeria could export football as a business if we had a bit of insight and structure towards it. And this is where there is long term wealth if we're able to focus on this area to boost the economy and the prestige of Nigeria. So, football should not simply just entertain the economy. It should actually bring some form of value. It should become part of the economy. It should bring some form of revenue, especially because it's on the global scale as much as it is. So what of FIFA? What is FIFA teaching us about the international system? Looking at it from a broader perspective. We've looked at it economically, we've looked at it politically, and even used developing countries and Nigeria as a case study. But internationally, what is FIFA actually saying? And this is why FIFA is very, very fascinating to me, my opinion, because it's teaching that power today it's no longer exercised only by governments. That level of influence is not only exercised by governments, and you see, they have power that comes from corporations, they come from brands, they come from media, they come from culture, they come from entertainment. The Shakira, the Bonner Boy, all those people, the future, the influence, they come from global institutions. So FIFA influences billions of people without passing a single law, without needing a visa, without needing your identity or knowing your insurance number or policy number. They influence a lot of people without even, passing any kind of law to make you identify as a citizen. All right, and that is very extraordinary. I find that very fascinating and very extraordinary. This is what it means when system, becomes bigger than itself. So, well, perhaps the World Cup is not just really about football. From the things that we've discussed today, I would say that it's also about economics. I would say that you can see the politics there, where you have the identity, you can see globalization in play, you can see soft power in play, and a very huge scale of commercial influence. And the competition between nations also shape how the world will see them. So you can imagine that everyone tries to bring their best forward when this FIFA tournament arrives. So football simply becomes the language through which these forces are expressed, the forces of soft power, the forces of politics, economic influence, globalization, you know, revenue generation, political economic structure. It's so dynamic and more. The only thing I think I've not really thought about is maybe football and AI because of the VAR and all of that. But that will be maybe on my next episode. Or if somebody has something to say about that aspect of this discussion, please feel free to put it on the comment section. So, when the referee blows that whistle and the football ends, the politics actually continues. Yeah, when everybody goes back home and spent money watching the football games, or you've traveled abroad to make sure you're sat in the stadium, or you've gone to a pub or some club just so you can enjoy the football with some form of money and entertainment, just know that the politics continues, the economics continues, and the diplomacy continues. And that is why understanding the World Cup means understanding it's far more than sport. We just don't see those big men in the suits just sat there for nothing. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is economics and politics interact within the international system, even for things that are simple or as simple as football. So let me know what you think. Let me hear your thoughts. Do you think the World Cup is still primarily about football, or has it become one of the world's biggest and political events? Share your thoughts in the comment section. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next week. Or join me on my channel again as we continue to explore how economics, politics, and power shape the international system. Till I see you again, bye for